The worst things about Iraq, according to Light Clock and AI. Number 1. The Gulf Wars. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, which caused the First Gulf War, which ended with Iraq losing a quarter of its territory and being forced to give back all of Kuwait's oil that they had stolen. And then, in 2003, the United States led an invasion into Iraq, which sparked what we now call the Iraq War, which has been going on for the past 18 years. But it was only 2 weeks ago that the last US troops left Iraq, so my first worst thing about Iraq is the 2 Gulf Wars. Number 2. Hearts and minds. During the Iraq War, the US used a heart and mind strategy to try to win over the Iraqi people. Now, winning hearts and minds is a standard strategy used by militaries around the world to try to take an enemy's side. You try to show the people that you are a good guy, so that they will want you there. And typically this works pretty well when you're fighting against another country's military, but not always so well when you're fighting against an insurgency. Because if the Iraqi people see the US military as an occupying force and not a liberating one, then they may sympathize with those fighting against you. And that's exactly what happened. It was the Sunni population of Iraq who welcomed the Americans after the fall of Baghdad. But it was them who switched sides once the insurgency began. The Americans were unable to win over the hearts and minds of the Iraqi people, and instead, during the war, more Sunni sided with the insurgents, and the Americans were forced to rely solely on the Shia majority to win the war. Now, winning hearts and minds isn't easy. It takes time, money, and patience, and it doesn't always work. But I believe that if the US would have done a better job at it, then maybe they could have ended the war sooner, or maybe even avoided it entirely. Number 3. The remainder of a people. The country of Iraq is divided into 3 main regions, each controlled by one of the 3 main ethnicities in the country: Kurdish, Shia, and Sunni. Each of these regions also control their own regional governments and armies. This means that Iraq isn't really one country, but instead 3 separate ones that are just stuck together. This lack of unity has made Iraq a very unstable country, because it is almost impossible for any one person to rule over all 3 regions fairly. There's also 4 separate religions in Iraq: Muslim, Christian, Jew, and Yazidi. The only reason that Iraq hasn't fallen into civil war yet is because of the threat of external intervention from Iran and Turkey. If either of these countries were to take advantage of a weak Iraq and start expanding their influence, then the other would feel threatened, and we could see military intervention in Iraq again. Number 4. Better off, I don't think. When Saddam Hussein was in power, he ruled with an iron fist. He kept the Kurds and Shiites under his thumb, and he ran the country with little opposition. When the United States invaded Iraq and removed Saddam Hussein from power, they hoped that democracy would come to the country and bring stability and peace to the region. But instead, all they did was replace one dictator with many. Iraq is still extremely corrupt, and they have a very high crime rate. They rank 167 out of 180 countries on the Corruption Perceptions Index, and 163 out of 180 countries on the Indies. Also, they are ranked as the most dangerous country in the world for journalists. In addition to that, since the Iraq War began, thousands of activists and intellectuals have been murdered. So I don't think that Iraq is a better place without Saddam Hussein. Number 5. Too much death and dollars. The war in Iraq has killed hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions. There are reports that say that up to 1 million Iraqi civilians have been killed during the Iraq War, which would be the second highest number of deaths in a conflict since World War II. And on top of that, there are 2 million refugees from Iraq. That's 6% of the entire country. That's one of the highest rates of refugees per capita in the entire world. Not to mention that during the Iraq War, the US spent over $2 trillion on the war effort, which is about $1,800 for every man, woman, and child in the country. And to add to that, every single day during the Iraq War, the United States spent $6.2 billion on the war. That's the equivalent of spending $1,800 for every single man, woman, and child in America. The United States spends more money on the military than the next 10 countries combined. And the Iraq War is a prime example of this. Thank you guys for watching this video. Stay informed with Lightclock and AI. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, leave them in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.